Everyday Juggler, your source for juggling highlights, interviews, tutorials, and reviews. And now your host, Sean Livingston.
What's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to this edition of Everyday Juggler Profiles. Today we get to hang out with Jim Fitzgerald. Jim, thanks so much for being with us. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about yourself, where you're from, how long you've been making juggling balls and beanbags and footbags with Flying Clipper, and what you're most excited about when it comes to making juggling props right now.
Yeah, well, I'm 63 now. I've been making handmade balls, primarily started with footbags and expanded into juggle balls since 1981. And I make all kinds of balls. We've made water toy balls. We've made most recently we're doing a lacrosse trainer ball. Just all kinds of handmade balls, and just I always look for the next new project. And right now, I'm producing a new performance ball, which hasn't been let out yet. And I'm pretty excited about that. The feedback is good. But recently, what really has floated my boat for designing is our new handmade rubber-filled juggle balls, which seem to be a real hit. And, I have everything from top pros to beginners that love these balls. There's just something about them. As one quote was, it's like squishing marshmallows between your fingers, That's kind of how they feel. I don't know if you've ever felt one, but there's nothing quite like them.
No, I haven't, but I've heard about them from other people as well. What's the name of that particular line?
We call it the Fat Tire Pro series, and I have them in 3 sizes, and actually 2 sizes in 3 different models. The most popular one is one that's 90% full, and that's almost, all the way full. So we call it the Pro 90, and that seems to be the most popular. But we produce footbags as well as juggle balls, and a passion for us here has been able to think about how to fuse the two, footbag and juggling, together. And this rubber-filled juggle ball was my first attempt in doing that, and really getting a ball that somebody like a Peter Irish or a Jordan Moyer would love to play with. And by the way, the balls are very popular, but both those folks that do the hands and feet juggling, the best 2 in the world that I just mentioned, they don't like the rubber-filled. They're particular, and a lot of top jugglers are.
Yep.
They need to have a prop that's perfect for them, and so what we set about designing a Peter Irish model and a Jordan Moyer model, and now they can get those balls whenever they want.
Right.
These guys are friends of mine, and especially Peter Irish. I've seen Peter Irish at the World Footbag Championships do dropless routines.
Wow.
And he won the World Championship more than one time. So there's nobody quite like him. And right now he's working on doing 5 balls in the hands and 3 balls on the feet. So watch out, man.
That would be awesome.
He's changing the world.
So you mentioned that Peter Irish doesn't prefer the rubber-filled ones. Depending on the juggler, what are some different things they like to see?
Well, Pete is a longtime footbagger before he kind of melded the two together, and he came up in an age where all footbags were, they were very soft and they were filled with plastic pellets. They were very light overall, and their small footbags are only about 2.2 inches in diameter. Really not big enough to be considered a juggle ball, unless you're somebody like Bill Code, who does multiplexes, world records. And by the way, Bill uses all our own balls too. And we've designed a couple of soft, small balls for Bill Code as well. But Pete likes a plastic-filled juggle ball, and because that's just what he came up with. Now, Jordan Moyer we use the same material, the same design, but he likes a steel pellet-filled ball. And he likes it super heavy.
Wow.
So
for footbagging.
Well, he juggles and footbags at the same time.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, he's amazing, and he just uses a half-filled ball that's very heavy, and so he's quite different. Somebody like Niles Dinker, he uses a very large ball, and it's
Yep.
super heavy.
Hmm.
Pros are, like I said, very particular about what they want, and they very rarely change props because they get used to a certain thing, and it's very hard to move them off that.
Yep.
But Niles, as soon as he saw our new performance ball, he immediately put him into his rotation.
Hmm.
So I was really happy to hear that.
That's awesome.
I'm hitting the mark with some pros that are hard to change their minds, but they definitely will if they find a good prop.
Yep. Well, you said before the interview started that that performance ball, that's not something that you've released yet. Is that something you can share with us more about, or do you want to wait on that?
Well, it's a new material. You see, so I kind of live my life in an atmosphere of serendipity. I produce, like I mentioned earlier, a lacrosse trainer ball. And in the process of making a lacrosse trainer ball, by the way, has to be a ball that can be uh, caught and thrown. And they throw these things up to 70 miles per hour. And
Hmm.
we had to produce a ball that would go through their rigorous needs. And so we took our balls and we kept finding new material and new filler to be able to take a lacrosse ball and throw it at a cement wall at 70 miles an hour, and it
Wow.
would bust. And the trainer ball is something that has to absorb shock. So we used the rubber filler, and we used it. Finally, found the right cover, and in finding that right cover material, that was the perfect cover material for the new performance ball.
Hmm.
And it took me a while to figure it out, but when I got a couple of samples made, and I sent them out to these few jugglers, this material's got such a great grip. It's got such high visibility color. Uh, just it's a fantastic ball. I've only made it in one size so far, and I'm getting pretty close to putting it out. But I still want a little bit more feedback.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a great ball. It's a ball that keeps its shape. A lot of pros don't want a ball that's soft.
Hmm.
Now, I'm really in the back of my mind producing a ball that will be great for Tai Tojo, and I've talked to him briefly via Facebook, and he wants a firm ball. He doesn't want one that's soft, but he wants one also that won't roll away.
Hmm.
So this new ball fits that bill.
Okay. Wow. Sounds like when you're creating props, you go in with this mindset of, all right, this has never been done before, and maybe it's impossible, but let's see if we can figure it out.
Yeah, it's something like that. Something like that. Like I said, it's more. I go by feel and feedback from the jugglers, and if I feel this could be something that jugglers are going to like, then I go ahead with it, and then I put it to the jugglers. So, like I said, it's serendipity. I mean, I found the rubber filler by trying to make a lacrosse trainer ball
Hmm.
because I had to have a ball that absorbs shock. And of course, ground up rubber absorbs shock.
Yep.
And same with the cover material. I had to find a cover material that would withstand 70 mile an hour impact. And out of that came this wonderful fabric that's made in Japan.
Hmm.
And, I wouldn't have found that otherwise. So I kind of, I go by the seat of my pants. And things get created because I have that kind of personality. I just want to create the next thing,
Yep.
whether it be playing music and writing a new song or the next new juggle ball.
Going back to the fat tire balls, can you explain to us a little bit about what materials that's made out of, and just how it's shaped, and then why you think jugglers like it so much?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. We recently I've went into semi-retirement in the last 6 years, and I let most of my business, my wholesale business, go to a much larger distributor who's a longtime friend of mine, World Footbag, and he's taken over manufacture of my footbag line, and it's really freed me up to think about what else I wanted to do with my life, kind of reinvent myself.
Mm-hmm.
But along the way, my friend at World Footbag also produces his own line, and he had the best fabric I've seen for footbags, and so I moved that fabric into our line as he started producing our line.
Mm-hmm.
And that fabric turned out to be the perfect thing for a rubber-filled juggle ball. Again, it's kind of serendipity. One thing leads to another, and then I go, wow, I just made a 32-panel juggle ball. I filled it with the ground-up rubber that I've learned from my lacrosse trainer balls,
Mm-hmm.
and I got the fabric from my partner, who produces his own line of footbags. And so those two things together, our original design and his fabric, has produced a fantastic ball.
Mm-hmm. 32 panels seems like that would be quite a sew job.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier I've sewn over 75,000 balls in my career.
Mm-hmm.
And a 32 panel like that, if you're really good, you can sew one in about 35 to 40 minutes.
Hmm.
Now, most sewers will probably never get that good, but that's how I've sewn one in 35 minutes before.
Hmm.
And, I'm a long ways away from that. I haven't really sewn in production for more than 15 years. But I think the average time that somebody would take to sew a 32 panel juggle ball would be about 45 to 55 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it does take time. Once the technique is mastered, though, it's like connect the dots. It's rote, and you just can sit down and produce.
Right.
Yeah, I sat down and produced 54 panel juggle balls one day. That was my record for juggle balls.
Yeah. So what do you think it is about the fat tire balls that have caught on so well?
Well, they're softer than you can believe, yet they have a pretty good shape. They keep their shape really well, and couple that to the fact that they can be washed.
Okay.
All of our balls can be machine washed, which
Wow.
is very appealing to jugglers.
So when you're looking to make a new product, when you think of fillings, you're immediately thinking of things that can be washed.
Yeah, I can't use organics. There's a lot of problems with organics that stem from seed sprouting, or millet being just ground to dust, and there's a lot of you can't wash a ball that's filled with millet or seed.
Right.
I've talked to Brian Dubé one time, and he said he got 20,000 balls from overseas, and he opened one of them up and it was filled with bugs.
Oh no.
Yeah, because it had seeds in there, and they were busily eating those seeds. So he had to trash the whole 20,000. I just don't like organics inside of a ball that are going to break apart, and they can't be washed.
Right. So what are some different fillings that you've put in different props?
Well, I have a unique ball that I invented before the fat tire ball, and it's called a hybrid. And it was an attempt to cross two different types of filling together that I used in juggle balls and footbags. The two fillings in footbags are generally, and they had been, plastic pellets and then sand. And recently footbags have moved into the metal pellets. But sand footbags took over from plastic, and now 90% of everything I sell is sand filled. But that sand filler is it's not quite sand, but it's more like a crushed rock. It's very, very fine, but not quite the grain of sand. In a hybrid, I took a 12-panel ball, and you see the panels if you look at the outside of a 12-panel ball. But on the inside of the ball, I've sewn another panel flat against it. So it's actually a 24-panel ball, and in between those two layers, I slipped the crushed rock in equally weighted amounts in every panel of the ball. So, and on the interior of the ball, I filled it with plastic pellets. So most of the ball's weight, or much of it, is isolated to the outside of the ball. And the physics of that will let you know that, number one, this ball rolls on the body like a contact juggle ball because all the weight's on the outside. No matter how soft it is, it'll roll.
Right.
It won't roll away on the floor. It'll stop dead because again, the weight is on the outside and it doesn't want to move once it hits. And number three, in collisions, in mid-air collisions when juggling, it absorbs the shock. It doesn't reflect the shock. And by the way, the rubber fill does the same thing when the balls hit together. It absorbs the shock. So collisions are less noticeable and easier to correct. So that hybrid ball takes heavy filler and isolates it to the outside and fills the interior ball up with plastic pellets. And that's gone a long way for me. The hybrid ball, I think it's my second most popular ball behind the rubber filled. But it's only recently that the rubber filled has become more popular.
Mm-hmm. That's a fascinating way to make a ball. Yeah, because of all the reasons you explained. That's great.
It is a little labor intensive, but it's a technique, and a good sewer, once they learn it, can just go about it like it's not that big of a deal. And I'd say a 12-panel hybrid will take about the same amount of time to sew as a 32-panel single-layer juggle.
So one thing I thought about when I was reading about your fat tires, or when I was hearing about your fat tires, is that there's kind of an upcycle aspect to them.
An upside what?
Upcycle aspect to them. Reusing something that was...
I've gotten that feedback too, and that's a side effect from... and it really is great to hear, and it's true. We've taken, old bicycle tires or old lacrosse balls or whatever things that are produced out of rubber, and we've taken their tailings, and we take it and we grind it up. And we sift it over and over, we wash it, we sift it again, and then we can put it into a ball in a measured amount. Yeah, and so it's a recycled aspect of the ball, which folks do appreciate.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's take it back to the beginning. And what was it, or where'd you start? You started with footbags, but how'd you even get into footbagging?
Well, I'm from the Eugene area mostly, and most of my life. And I went to the Oregon Country Fair in 1977, and I was on the security detail there. I don't know if you're familiar with the Oregon Country Fair.
Mm-mm.
Well, it's just the biggest, how shall I say, handmade open air crafts camp out. And it's just a fantastic event, which I don't go to it anymore, but my booth is still there with my partners. But I was at the fair in 1977, and I was walking down the path, and all of a sudden there was 3 or 4 hippie-looking guys, and I resemble that remark, by the way. And they were keeping this little thing in the air using nothing but their feet, and they were helping each other. They were keeping this ball in the air, and they weren't competing against each other. They were actually helping each other. And I said, I'm going to learn that game. And by the end of that summer, I could kick it 50 times by myself. And I had a really close friend. We played music together, and we'd play for an hour, and then we'd kick for an hour. Well, I went to after that, I've been playing for about a year. I went to the Lane County Fair, which is in Eugene, and I met a guy. His name was Gary Baker, and he pulled me to the side and wanted to kick alone. And come to find out, he was the guy that brought me into the Eugene crowd scene for footbag and juggling. And, I never looked back since then. And that was back in the late 70s. By 79, I went to my first footbag tournament. And I met the legends in the game, which are John Stahlberger, who invented hacky sack, and Kenny Schultz, who's won more than 50 world championships. Wow. Held his first world record at age 13. And I met them at an event, and I decided I wanted to be involved. So I saved up some money, and I became an investor in a little startup company, and Flying Clipper was born from that. And I became a full partner in 1983, and I took over operations in 1986. And it was only a part-time job at that time. And my other partners never got reconnected with the business, and I've been running it pretty much by myself ever since then.
So, what was the main the driving force behind joining, or joining Flying Clipper and making it something?
Well, that was it. We loved keeping that little ball in the air, and we couldn't find a good one. I remember going to the local sporting goods store, and this was a brand new sport. You got to remember, there were only a few places in the whole state that you could find them.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd have to go in there, and we'd look through a whole bin of them because they were all sold bulk to find the one that we could take back home and break in with a hammer. That's how unround they were, and how thick the leather was. Didn't lend itself to being very round. Didn't kick true because it wasn't very round. So we got busy and wanted to make something that actually, when you put your foot on it, would come straight up and down like you would hope. And that's how Flying Clipper was born. We, out of a need to make a rounder footbag, we made them for ourselves. Friends wanted them. Pretty soon we got an account or two. And before you know it, I'm running 10 sewers in Eugene. And man, it's a handcrafted business. I see myself mostly as a craftsperson and not a businessman, although business is part of the process. I look at every ball that's made under me and sold by me as if I made it myself. And so I think that if you talk to anybody who's ever dealt with this, now you can't please 100% of the people, but you're gonna hear that we stand behind what we do, and we leave no customer unsatisfied. So that's kind of that's because I see every ball as if I made it myself from the eyes of a craftsman.
Right. In the beginning, you started with footbags, and you just had one line, I assume. And how did it evolve into what it is today?
Well, we became partners, three of us, myself, Jim Fitzgerald, Reed Gray, and Dennis Ross, with starting out with 3 designs. Okay. And I co-invented those one of those designs, which led to the other designs. I'm kind of like an idea man, but I'm not really the guy that knew how to understand the process, the geometry. Reed Gray is really the genius behind the designs. I'm the guy that kind of built the fire underneath him to make him do it. That's kind of the way I see it. And those designs, like the 14-panel design, that was one of our original designs. That design opened up into a juggle ball that was so round and beautiful, and it kind of looked like a soccer ball. That we immediately started making them bigger and giving them to our friends, and they loved them. And from there, Brian Dubé finally got a set of them, and he started ordering by the thousands. There was a time where we couldn't keep up with the production. I had 10 sewers, and I was always in production. I'd sew 12, 14 hours a day just to try to keep up with the demand. And out of that came the need to take the next step, because I couldn't grow my business being stuck in production. And the next step was to have them made somewhere else. It was about cost, and it was about the ability to produce enough balls to feed the market.
Yep. When you when you're thinking about a new ball or a new design, what's the process for that? Do you look for a problem first, or you just So what's the process?
No, I like I said, it's serendipity for me. I see. I ask myself, well, what would I do to make a better juggle ball? What could I do different? That sets it apart from what everybody else is doing. And without really, I didn't delve too much into what they were doing, but I kind of knew what was out there in the market. Right. With G balls and Sport Co. I went to a few IJA shows really, really early in the late 80s, and when IJA was really, really easy to be part of. It's not so easy anymore. But, that's where I went, and I'd look for the feedback from the jugglers.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure if I answered your question properly, but
That's okay. I mean, it sounds like what you're saying is you just how do you make something better? That's
yeah, a better mousetrap really is what it's all about. That's how we started the business. We wanted to have a better hacky sack.
right.
We certainly achieved that.
Have you ever had a design that flopped?
Oh yeah, and trade names that I spent lots of money on that flopped for whatever reason.
Can you
Yeah.
tell us about one of those?
Well, an interesting one is that when we were really top in our field in footbag, I was going to all the events. I was the guy that everybody wanted to sew their ball, their footbag. And Kenny Schultz came up. He's the superstar in the game. And his at the award ceremony at the World Championships in 1984, he took out a footbag I made for him. He said, "This is the juiciest footbag I have ever seen." And everybody started chanting the word juice. Those couple hundred people in the crowd, and they all just started chanting juice, juice, juice. And so I took that name and I trademarked it. I registered the trademark as far as I knew. But my legal team, this may sound funny, but all kind of things happen in business.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he never filed my registration, and I lost it. I never did get it because it expired, and I thought I had it. I paid the guy, and it come to find out that he wasn't even really a lawyer.
Oh no.
He worked for a firm that was a legal firm, and they stood behind it, and they paid me damages.
Okay.
But without that legal firm coming to bat for me, I would have lost tens of thousands of dollars. And they made good on it because this was their guy.
Yep.
And come to find out, he wasn't even really a lawyer, and he'd been taking his client's money and not putting it into the firm.
He
I got
wasn't a
caught
lawyer.
in that. So that juice footbag, it was destined in my mind to be the biggest winner we ever made, but it wasn't. It just flopped because I never got the protection I needed early on, and the market moved by it.
So that might have been one of your bigger disappointments through the years. What was?
Yeah, it certainly was.
What was like your greatest moment of satisfaction, or one of them? Because I'm sure there's been many.
Yeah, I think in all my travels, and I've traveled around the world a couple of times for producing the balls that I make, it's being with the people in the different countries. And I'll tell you what, you're in semi or third world countries, including China, including Taiwan, the Philippines, India, and Pakistan. And I went to Mexico and Guatemala as well. But the contentment and the happiness of people is probably what's touched my heart. And we ended up staying in a country, in two different countries, the Philippines and the Pakistan. But I spent most of my time in Pakistan. I have a teacher that is in India. I follow an Eastern mysticism of meditation and vegetarianism. Mm-hmm. But, Pakistan used to be part of India, and I felt like I was at home there. And these people were so good, and they had never seen juggle balls or footbags before. I was the first. So I gave them a whole new way to make a living. And by the way, I paid them twice the going rate so I could get the best sewers on my team. Mm-hmm. And I hired a friend that was my interpreter on my first trip there. I hired him to start his own business. And he recruited the same sewers that I taught on my first visit. And they're still my core sewers to this day. And that was back in 1992. So the loyalty and the friendships I think that I've made along the way, especially in Pakistan, and I've given them a way to make a living that they didn't have.
Yeah.
Just really, it touches my heart. And, that's probably the best thing that's happened to me through all my travels in making these balls.
Yeah, that's one of the things I've been thinking about over the last couple of months. The most exciting thing to me is that in developing countries, juggling, just being able to juggle, and like busking worldwide, is a way that can actually change the economy of people's lives.
Yes.
And I thought that was exciting, but I hadn't even thought about this aspect of it, of enabling them to, you know, make product either for the West or for people juggling in their own country.
Right. And yeah, not just that part of it, but also, like you said, the busking part. I didn't busk, but wherever I went, I'd pull out my foot bag and I'd have a crowd of people around me,
Hmm.
whether it be in China or Taiwan. I mean, one time I was in, a incredible hotel in the city that's, only got 1 million people in China that nobody's heard of. It's kind of funny here because we know all those big cities, but the city, I was in this big hotel and I was jet lagged and I looked down and it was just getting light and there was a big park down there. And as the light came up, I could see there must have been 300 or 400 people, but they were in groups of 10, 15, and 20. And there was somebody leading a type of exercise or martial arts out there,
Hmm.
Tai Chi and swords and just stretching. And I came down there. I just couldn't sleep. So I went down there and I pulled out my foot bag by myself and started kicking. And I had 30 people around me and they wanted me to teach them what I was doing. My only regret is I didn't yet have product that I could have just handed out to them. I was there to get stuff made and I hadn't had it made yet. And so I ended up getting some pieces together and hand sewing a few foot bags, and I brought them out, and they just loved them.
Hmm.
So that also touched my heart. You don't have to speak the language when you are a juggler or a footbagger. You just start playing,
Hmm.
and it's like a magnet. You know, I just that there's nothing like it, as you probably know from what I was hearing you say.
Yep.
It's magic.
Yep. It's a universal language.
Yes, it is.
What's one experience you've had that you're really proud of that you wouldn't have had uh, a public experience if you hadn't been part of Line Clipper?
Well, I will have to say there's a couple. There's three that come to mind, and one was when I won a national championship in footbag freestyle in Boulder, Colorado in 1984. And that's the only time I won. I wasn't like the top of my game, but I happened to win it that year. It was just a magical time. People actually threw me up on their shoulders or tried to, because they could see that I was excited.
Yeah.
And that was the first thing that I can really say that kind of lifted me to a different level in public. Uh, and then the second one was also around footbag, is when I was inducted into the Footbag Hall of Fame in 1998.
Mm.
Most of my experiences are around footbag, but like I said, footbag and juggling are hand in hand.
Hmm.
And
Or hand and foot.
hand in foot, thank you. And they really do occupy the same places in your mind, when you're doing it. And when I used to go and I used to kick avidly, I mean, I kicked all the time. I'd go to like the Oregon Country Fair, and I'd pick out 3 or 4 of my favorite people that we'd meet there and only there all year round. These are special people that would come from different parts of the country that were just loved footbag at the same level that I did. And we would isolate ourselves and play in a circle. And I don't know if I can explain it right, but when you play with a core group of people footbag and you're not competing against each other, you're competing against gravity,
Hmm.
that takes the level of play to a different, uh, you get high from it
Yeah.
because you know there's always going to be somebody that's going to save your miss. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And it happened in this kind of a flow, free flow. I mean, that was the name of our footbag club because of the feelings. And I came up with that name myself too, and I was the original president of that club. But the flow of a circle when everybody understands and is on the same wavelength can be just taken to a level that is indescribable.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was even better than getting inducted into the Hall of Fame because I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. It's just very, very high experience from those kind of circle play.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking it's a time where you feel like you're part of something bigger
Yeah, I
together.
did that in juggling as well. We'd get 5 or 6 people and we'd do feeds, with everybody juggling 3 or excuse me. I would juggle 7 or 8 between 2 people. I could
Mm-hmm.
with the pens and stuff. It was just I don't juggle as much as I used to. I can't because of my arthritis. I overwork myself sewing.
Mm.
I can't kick anymore either, and I can't raise my arms for any length of time above my shoulders because of repetitive motion problems.
Right.
Yeah, anybody who sews thousands and thousands of balls probably should have quit a few years earlier than they did. You could ask Fergie. I don't know if you remember Fergie.
Yeah.
Yeah, he probably sewed maybe 35,000 juggle balls, and he got wore out.
Yeah. Well, you don't quit till it starts hurting. It's too late.
Yeah, and then it's too late. But I fare okay. It's just that there's certain things I can't do anymore. I have to compensate it. I can still sit and play my guitar or get out and do yard work and gardening, which I like to do, and stuff like that. But I had to give up the play and I had to give up the sewing. So out of those losses came all of these new ideas for new ways to make balls.
Mm-hmm.
It's like reinventing myself. I had to do something.
Yeah. Well, we're sorry for your pain, but we're happy for the results.
Thank you.
What are would you mind, or do you have any ideas on which balls would be good for what kind of juggler?
Somewhat, like I touched on a little bit. Some of the real pros, they've got to have a firm, full ball that won't roll away. They don't want one to get too soft on them. A firm ball is more predictable in flight,
Mm-hmm.
and these guys are juggling 7 on stage. They want predictability, and that's also the reason why they don't switch props very often.
Right.
But for the overall market, I knew that a squishy, soft juggle ball that kept its shape and could be washable was going to be a winner.
Mm-hmm. Well, so for people listening to this episode, if they're interested in buying a set of balls, just some overall guidance for where they should start.
Well, if you're a casual juggler, the best ball for catching and throwing, especially catching, is the fat tire ball. Beginners love it, especially kids. I make the Pro 90 I mentioned that's 90% filled, but a lot of young kids enjoy the 70% filled. And I also find that regular jugglers do too, because you can squish down 5 balls and put them in your back pocket almost.
Yep.
And so that's a popular thing. But we promote Bennett Santoro, which is a 12-year-old juggler out of New York City, and he loves those Pro 70s. And kids watch his videos. They pay attention to what he's doing. He's working on 7 balls at his age. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
And he loves the Pro 70s. And so I sell a lot of beginners, young kids, the Pro 70s, just because it's like I said, squeezing a marshmallow between your fingers.
Mm-hmm. And why might someone want to try out one of the other types?
Well, we try to make a juggle ball that'll fit just about every juggling discipline you can think of, from high numbers. I've got folks that have 20. I've donated a bunch of balls, and they're between him and another guy. They're working on 20. I don't know if they'll ever get it, but we really do have a ball for every type of juggling, whether it be multiplex. Like I said, Bill Code, he just emailed me 2 days ago, and he broke a new world record of the 10 quadplex using our balls. So we want to have a ball for every type of juggler, and in doing that, I have too many models. I'm a little embarrassed to tell you, but some of them sell slow and some of them sell fast. But I've got something that's going to be right for any type of juggling, any level of play. And lastly, I'm trying to capture that upper end market, and with this new performance ball, and a couple of pros are really raving about it. So, I'm 63. I'm going to be 63 in 3 months. So I don't know how much more designing I'm going to do, but I'm sure enjoying it. And I'm not ready to stop yet.
I think you've still got a long way to go.
Yeah, thank you.
So, if people are interested in checking out your stuff, whether it's bean bags, balls, footbags, or anything else you have, where can they look?
They can look on flyingclipper.com or they can look on amazon.com.
Okay, cool.
And that's the only sales channels I have now. That keeps me very busy. Like I said, most of my wholesale, they can go to just about any corner or sporting goods store in their city, and they'll find my line of dirt bags, because my manufacturer and distributor he's everywhere, nationwide. And so that's where they can go, either online at flyingclipper.com or amazon.com, or just call up their local sporting goods store.
All right. And is there anything that we haven't talked about that you think my listeners would want to hear?
I think we've covered it pretty well.
All right, great. You have the last word. What are some words of inspiration to the juggling community at large?
Keep it up. Let me know. Give me the feedback, and I'll make the next new thing.
All right. Keep on juggling, and let Jim Fitzgerald know what you want, and he'll make sure that you get it.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to this edition of Everyday Juggler. Thanks, Jim, for being with us. And everybody else, make sure you check out all the other interviews and highlight reels posted every single week. Until next time, keep on juggling.
Thanks for watching. If you like what you saw, be sure to support the channel. Leave a comment, like, share, and subscribe.